All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling startup teams.
Yeah, always a fascinating topic.
I was really intrigued by this podcast. How to manage a team in your startup. It really gets into the nitty-gritty.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Leading a team in a startup is a whole different ballgame.
Totally. It's not like managing a team in a big corporation, right?
Completely different. It's
Mm.
way more like dynamic. Everything changes so fast.
So the podcast talked about the importance of hiring for attitude and cultural fit, even over specific skills.
Yeah, especially in the early stages. You need people who are adaptable.
I thought that was really interesting. Like they suggested asking interview candidates about challenges they've overcome.
Oh, that's a good one. To see how they handle like setbacks,
Yeah.
that startup resilience.
Exactly. Because stuff is going to hit the fan, right?
Oh, for sure. And you need people who can roll with it. Problem solving is key.
And then there's the whole vision and mission thing,
Yeah.
which the podcast really hammered home.
Yeah, it's not enough to just have it written down somewhere.
Right. You have to actually bring it to life.
Exactly. Your team has to believe in it. It's got to be their North Star.
They suggested telling stories, like showing data that connects what people are doing to that bigger picture.
Oh, absolutely. People need to see how their role fits into the overall mission. That's what gets them fired up.
Makes sense. And then there's the communication piece, which in a startup is like everything.
It has to be constant and open. Things move so fast.
The podcast recommended regular team meetings and one-on-one check-ins.
Yeah, those are essential, but they have to be done right.
Right. They can't just be boring status updates.
No, definitely not. Team meetings are a chance to celebrate wins, troubleshoot problems together, make sure everyone's on the same page.
And those one-on-ones, I think, are so important for giving feedback, offering support, just really connecting with each team member.
Absolutely. It's about building relationships and trust.
The podcast really emphasized a two-way feedback culture. It's not just the leader telling people what to do.
Exactly. Everyone should feel comfortable speaking up, sharing ideas. It's about creating that open dialogue.
Okay, this next part is where I was like, yes, empowering your team with trust.
That's huge, especially in a startup.
The podcast talked about the dangers of micromanaging.
Oh, yeah. Micromanaging can really stifle creativity and motivation.
Right. People need the freedom to, make decisions, take ownership.
Exactly. You have to trust them to do their jobs and be there to support them, of course.
So how do you balance that? Giving people autonomy, but also making sure things are moving in the right direction.
Focus on outcomes, not tasks. Define what success looks like for a project, and then let your team figure out the best way to get there.
So set clear expectations, but then let go of the reins a bit.
Exactly. You're there to guide and mentor, not dictate every step.
And speaking of making mistakes, that's inevitable in a startup.
It's going to happen. You're trying new things, pushing boundaries.
The podcast talked about creating a culture where mistakes aren't seen as, the end of the world.
Right. Mistakes are learning opportunities.
It's instead of freaking out, you approach it with curiosity.
Exactly. You ask questions, you figure out what went wrong, and how you can do better next time.
It's all about that growth mindset, right?
For sure. You have to embrace those learning opportunities. That's how you innovate and grow. So we've been talking about a lot of crucial stuff for building a strong startup team.
Yeah, we've covered hiring, vision, communication, all those foundational pieces.
Exactly. And remember, one of the key elements we touched on was those one-on-one check-ins?
Oh, yeah, those. I'm still a little fuzzy on what they should actually look like in a startup, though.
Well, they're definitely not your typical corporate performance review.
Okay, good. Because that sounds super stuffy and formal.
Right. It's way more casual than that. Think of it more as a dedicated time to connect with each team member.
Gotcha. So it's more about open dialogue,
Mm,
offering support, just making sure everyone's on the same page.
exactly. It's a chance for you both to check in, human to human.
I like that. So what kind of things should we actually be talking about in these check-ins?
Well, a few key areas are important to hit. First, you want to touch base on their projects, see how things are going.
Okay, so a progress update. Are they hitting any roadblocks?
Mhm.
Anything you can help with?
Right. It's about staying in the loop and offering support proactively, especially in a startup. Things can change so quickly.
Makes sense. It's like a pulse check on both the person and the project.
Exactly. And then, of course, you want to use these check-ins as an opportunity to give and receive feedback.
Oh yeah, feedback's super important. But it has to be done right.
Absolutely. It needs to be specific and actionable. Don't just say, good job. Tell them exactly what you liked about their work and why.
So they can, repeat that success.
Right. And don't forget, feedback should go both ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not just the leader talking. The team member should feel comfortable giving feedback too.
Totally. Whether it's about their role, company processes, even your leadership style.
It's their chance to speak up, share their ideas.
Exactly. Those check-ins can be a goldmine for building trust and that open communication we talked about earlier.
I want to circle back to something we touched on before, that whole empowering your team with trust thing.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
The podcast really stressed the dangers of micromanaging.
Micromanaging can be a killer, especially in a startup.
It's like you want to give people freedom, but also make sure, things are moving in the right direction. How do you find that balance?
Focus on the outcomes, not the tasks. Clearly define what success looks like for a project, and then step back and let your team figure out how to get there.
So it's that whole trust your team thing, right?
Exactly. But it's not like you just abandon them completely. You're still there to guide, to mentor, to offer support.
So it's like you're setting them up for success, but then giving them the space to figure things out on their own.
Exactly. And that includes making mistakes.
Oh yeah, those learning opportunities.
Exactly. Which, in a startup, are gonna happen.
All the time. You're trying new things, pushing boundaries.
So it's about creating a culture where mistakes are seen as part of the process.
Right, not the end of the world.
And you, as the leader, set that tone. You have to make it clear that mistakes are okay, that they're actually valuable learning experiences.
So when someone messes up, you don't, freak out.
Definitely not. Instead of getting angry or placing blame, you approach it with curiosity. You ask questions.
What happened? What did you learn? How can we do better next time?
Exactly. You shift the focus from blame to understanding and learning.
And that creates that safe space for people to experiment and, take risks.
Which is essential for innovation.
Mm.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about something that nobody really loves dealing with: conflict.
Oh yeah, conflict. It's gonna happen.
Especially in a startup environment. But it's not always a bad thing.
So how do you handle it when things get, heated?
First, you have to acknowledge that conflict is normal. It's going to happen in any team, especially when everyone's passionate and working hard.
Okay, so you don't try to pretend it's not there.
Exactly. You embrace it as a natural part of the process, and then you manage it constructively.
So channeling that energy in a positive direction.
Exactly. Create a safe space where people can have open and honest dialogue.
I can see where that would be important. Everyone needs to feel like they can speak their mind.
Absolutely. And just as important, listen to understand, not just to respond.
But sometimes that's the hardest part,
Yeah.
right? Really listening. But it seems crucial.
It is. As a leader, you're not there to judge or take sides. You're a facilitator.
You're helping them find a resolution, right?
Exactly. Help them find common ground, explore different perspectives, come up with solutions together.
What about those conflicts that feel more personal, like personality clashes or people having completely different work styles? Those can be tough to resolve.
They can be tricky, but the same principles apply. Encourage empathy and understanding. Help them see things from each other's point of view.
Even if their styles are totally different, maybe they can find a way to work together more effectively.
Exactly. Now, sometimes those conflicts can escalate to the point where they're really impacting the team.
Like it's gone beyond a healthy debate and is starting to affect productivity, the overall vibe.
In those situations, it might be time to bring in a neutral third party.
Like a mediator.
Yeah, someone who can offer a fresh perspective and help everyone move forward.
Makes sense. Sometimes you need someone to, referee the situation and make sure things stay fair and productive.
Exactly. So we've talked about conflict, but remember, leading a startup team is not all about dealing with tough situations.
Right. It's also about celebrating the wins, the successes.
Absolutely. Recognizing and rewarding your team is so important for building morale and keeping everyone motivated.
Okay, so we've talked about building a strong team, communicating effectively, empowering people with trust, and even navigating conflict. What else is there?
Well, one thing the podcast really emphasized was fostering a culture of continuous learning and development.
Oh, right, that makes sense. In a startup, you're constantly learning, adapting, trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. Your team needs to be constantly growing and evolving.
But, the reality is that resources are often pretty limited in a startup.
Yeah, budgets can be tight in those early days.
So how do you create that learning culture without breaking the bank?
You have to get creative. One of the best resources you have is your own team.
What do you mean? Like tapping into the skills and knowledge that already exists within the company?
Exactly. Maybe you have a marketing person who's a whiz with data analysis. Have them lead a workshop for others. Or a developer who can do a lunch and learn session on, a new programming
I
language.
love that. It's like creating a learning network within the company.
Right. And then there are all those amazing external resources that are free or super affordable.
Oh yeah, there's so much out there these days. Online courses, webinars, industry blogs.
Exactly. Encourage your team to set aside time each week to explore stuff that interests them, to learn new skills.
And it doesn't always have to be formal learning, right? Sometimes it's just about encouraging that general curiosity, that desire to, figure things out.
Absolutely. Create a culture where people feel comfortable asking questions, experimenting, even working on side projects that align with their goals.
So it's really about making learning a part of the company culture.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about something that's often overlooked in the startup hustle, recognizing and rewarding contributions.
Oh yeah, that's so important. But it can be tough when you don't have a lot of money to throw around.
Right. But it doesn't have to be about big bonuses or fancy perks. Sometimes it's those small, meaningful gestures that make the biggest impact.
Like a handwritten thank you note, or just a sincere thank you for someone's hard work.
Exactly. Those things go a long way in making people feel appreciated.
It's about acknowledging their effort, their dedication, their contribution to the bigger picture.
Right. And when it comes to more tangible rewards, think about what would be truly meaningful to your team. Maybe it's an extra day off or a team lunch at that new restaurant everyone's been talking about.
Get creative. Personalize those rewards. Make it special.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about something that every startup dreams of: growth.
Ah, growth. But it can be a double-edged sword, right?
Definitely. It's exciting, but it can also be really challenging for a team.
Things change so fast. Roles shift. New people come on board.
Exactly. So it's crucial to manage those transitions really carefully.
How do you do that? Like, how do you make sure your team doesn't feel like they're on a runaway train?
Transparency is key. Be upfront about the changes that are happening and why. Explain how roles might evolve, how the team structure might change.
It's about preparing them for what's ahead, giving them the support they need to navigate those changes.
Right. And don't forget to celebrate those wins along the way. Acknowledge all the hard work and dedication.
Because that's what keeps people motivated, right?
Okay. Exactly. It reminds everyone why they joined this crazy ride in the first place.
Well, I think we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive.
We have. From building the team to fostering a learning culture to navigating growth, it's clear that leading a startup team is a real journey.
It's definitely not easy, but it sounds incredibly rewarding.
It is. To see a team come together, support each other, and achieve amazing things, there's nothing quite like it.
So for all you startup leaders out there, remember to invest in your people, communicate openly and honestly, and never stop learning and growing.
Your team is your greatest asset. Their success is your success.
That's fantastic advice. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of startup teams.
And remember, the journey is just beginning. Until next time.